Well, back to the political garbage. Some Trumpster fire couriered a bunch of pipe bombs to different prominent Democratic officials, like Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, Maxine Waters, and also Robert De Niro for some reason. He's been vocally anti-Trump, but so has 99% of Hollywood. I'm surprised all of Los Angeles didn't get leveled by an explosion. None of the bombs went off, all were intercepted as you'd expect them to be, and they found the guy responsible to be some crazed old Native American dude with a manifesto of right-wing bumper stickers on his vehicle of choice. A white van, who'd have guessed? Native American, though, that's a new one. I'm glad our terrorist pool is getting so diverse. Say what you will, but these inclusion initiatives are working. I heard GLAAD wants LGBT representation of terrorists to be at least 10% by the end of the year. Kidding aside, a phrase I never truthfully say, this act of objective terror should be condemned by all, as it mostly is being. Unfortunately, stunts like this dredge up a lot of played-out terrible sentiments where people blame Trump like he did that shit, followed by please vote. Several things with that. One, nobody is responsible for the actions of crazy people, sometimes not even crazy people. When people say they have voices in their heads, they don't mean the ones on TV. But this argument is to be expected from the crowd who sees speech as violence when it comes from a Republican's mouth. It's also hard to argue that this dude was emboldened by Trump's rhetoric when his rap sheet was already a mile long before any of this went down. 20 plus crimes, including battery and drug charges. Certainly no one can make the case that Trump is radicalizing otherwise innocent people into terrorists. Also, what violent rhetoric of his are you referring to specifically when you say he's responsible for this crazy person's actions? That time he told his supporters to mail pipe bombs to their enemies? Can't remember that one. The lock her up chants? How is calling for someone's arrest violent? Imprisonment is a little different from being fucking exploded. Democrats certainly call for Trump's arrest on the regular, but if he ever got assassinated, I sincerely doubt they'd blame themselves in their saucy speech for it. He had an attempt on his life in 2016 before the election, if you recall, which I didn't because the media hardly reports on such trivial things as assassination attempts of Republicans. Dude at a rally tried to steal a security person's gun and shoot Trump right there. He was stopped, sentenced to like a year, and then deported back to the UK. Democrats back then were like, oh pshaw, he was mental, it's not reflective of our party. Oh really? Granted he was British, but British people are pretty invested in our politics as of late, and if you're passionately anti-Trump, that's just a mentality all its own. Trump's family members have been sent suspicious packages containing white powder that resulted in preventative hospitalization. Republican congressmen were shot at a baseball field by a left-wing activist. To say that one party over another is a party of terrorism is to be an idiot. There is no party of terrorism. There are just parties who sometimes have crazy people do crazy shit who are not being incited to do so unless explicitly told to do so. A proper example of incitement doing as incitement does would be Maxine Waters telling everyone to find Republicans where they work, where they eat, where they live, physically push back against them, and make sure they're uncomfortable. That has verifiably led to several instances of lawmakers being hounded at restaurants and yelled at, being forced to leave, and having their food thrown out. It's not incitement to murder, but it's an example of a Democratic senator explicitly telling her supporters to engage in specific targeted acts of harassment towards members of the opposite political aisle. That's sure not good, and many liberals know it, but the more hysterical ones are all too keen to hunt down grossly mislabeled fascism at its favorite burger joints and scream until their hipster glasses fall off and the trauma lands them back in the therapist's office. I can just imagine their retelling of the event. I found out this GOP fascist was at a restaurant near me, so I went there and was immediately assaulted by his presence. So in retaliation to his violence, I started chanting something that didn't make sense with a bunch of other psychologically soft people who were gathered there, and we were all breathing at different times in the middle of the chant so it sounded super muddled, and eventually the Hitler finally got up and walked out, but as he brushed past me, I felt his shoulder on my shoulder for a second, and the overwhelming aggression knocked me to the ground, and I just couldn't stop crying until a girl with short blue hair and a septum piercing helped me up and told me we had triumphed over evil. Nobody is responsible for how their speech is interpreted by other people. Some dude started murdering people after the show Dexter inspired him. You think they're responsible? Did the show tell people to murder? Did The Catcher in the Rye? Did the Bible? And if you say yes to the Bible, did the Quran? That's where you split a lot of liberals because they're sworn to protect Islam as a religion of peace for some reason, but take every opportunity to denounce Christianity. How about don't kill people based on any religious text? And when people do anyway, how about don't don't blame the book for how it affects already demented human beings. Nobody's speech is responsible for violence unless it directly calls for violence. Some people were reporting on the pipe bomber that he watched a lot of Ben Shapiro and then tried to assign him blame. Are you fucking joking me? He's one of the most prominent conservative pundits there are. Of course right-wingers watch him. The guy who shot up the congressional baseball field was a giant Bernie Sanders supporter. Nobody should blame him for that shit either. The Jacksonville shooter played a lot of Madden. Is football responsible? Should we be asking Roger Goodell how he feels about being complicit in that tragedy? Silence that garbage argument. It's so inane. I never want to fucking hear that shit again. Hate speech is violence. Well, I hate you. Better call 911 and throw me in jail, you pussy. Hope my words didn't leave any bruises on your anorexically thin skin. Jesus Christ. A synagogue was just shot up too. 11 Jews killed. Was yarmulke wearing Ben Shapiro responsible for that one also? The shooter wasn't even a Trump supporter. His social media said he didn't vote for him and has never touched a MAGA hat. It was all just Jew hatred across the board. Blamed Jews for aiding the migrant caravan, said Trump was surrounded by kikes, universally deplorable shit. Vox eye-rollingly reported that the shooter's motive was unknown, even though he was yelling anti-Semitic things the entire time, literally stating his motive over and over again. Vox is the Fox News of left-wing media, in case you're unaware. You best be careful reading anything they put out. A columnist at Slate magazine tweeted that his editor said you're not allowed to call the murder of Jews in the U.S. racist in left-leaning publications because they're too white to be the victims of racism. That's just swell. Jews, like Muslims, are not a race, but Jews are protected as such under the 1964 Civil Rights Act, but even to imply that members of a religious group are too privileged to be legitimately persecuted, as if the Holocaust never happened, is a new low for parts of the left? A similar low? I just don't know how you can claim to be about social justice when you consider a religious group that lost 6 million people to systematic genocide to be too privileged to qualify for persecution. They feel the same about Christians, obviously, who are still the most persecuted religious group in the world by a large margin in over 140 countries. But that's good news. If it means there's less of them around to not bake cakes for lesbians, thank Christ, right? But don't. He started all this. I don't understand the calls to vote over stuff like this. People just parrot the latest tragedy statistics and then go, November 6th, please, I beg you. The current administration isn't shooting up synagogues. I've never heard of one that did. Voting's got nothing to do with it. Are there terrorists on the ballot? Is the pipe bomber running for Senate? Then what the fuck are you talking about? And why would you think a leadership change is gonna affect insane people? If only Trump wasn't president, that bomber might have been a social worker instead. He might have rebuilt neighborhoods in impoverished areas. He could have run a soup kitchen. Tell people to vote, but don't use that as an excuse. It's a BS excuse that doesn't track. If you're in elementary school and your classmate punches you in the face, is the solution to demand a new principal? I've got analogies all day on this subject, don't test me. I know the midterms aren't a presidential election, so just switch out principal for faculty member or some shit. It was just smoother to say the other way. I have yet to break my 6-year non-voting streak, though I'm getting closer. At least now it's driven by anxiety instead of apathy. Let me know when you can vote from the comfort of your own home and then introduce that supremely hackable online mess into the picture. Seems like the ballots malfunction in some way annually anyway though, so maybe it's not much of an added risk. Well, that's gonna do it for this episode. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you can like, share, and subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter at Sunburned Albino. You can support the channel monthly on Patreon at patreon.com/sunburnedalbino, which is extremely helpful now that YouTube's demonetizing a bunch of shit. YouTube's being shitty. They're just shitty people, and so everyone's revenue's getting cut. It's a bunch of garbage. Anyway, I'll see you guys next time.